Good morning and welcome to Coffee with Alain. Appreciate everybody that shows up and comments, watches, replays, listens to the podcast, whether it's on enjoylifesafely.com's website, whether it's Apple, Spotify. I appreciate all of you. And if you go to enjoylifesafely.com, be sure to get on that newsletter if you're not on that yet. As you can see, I have a special guest today, and that's why I'm drinking out of my mug. It's good to have friends. And something interesting, it's really good to have friends with a background that's diverse. Nick has been on the show before, and we've talked about active shooters. We've talked about chokes. We've talked about violence, and Nick is an expert at that. You know, if you've read some of his books, like How to Be Your Own Bodyguard, or seen his videos that used to sell with Paladin, the same as my DVDs, you know that Nick Hughes is a force to be reckoned with in the self-defense, security, safety industry. But what you might not know is Nick and I have also talked about Tony Robbins strategies, or Tony Robbins' mentor, Jim Rohn, and the strategies he taught for success and personal development. Nick has worked with billionaires and millionaires and seen how they achieved things. So instead of writing about self-defense, he has written about how you can achieve things, how you can achieve goals in this new book, Aspire. And I wasn't going to have guests on for the rest of the year. I was going to look at like maybe starting to have guests in January again. But when I found out that this book just came out, I thought, you know, we need to talk about it now, because right now is when people are planning for 2026. And this book will help you plan and set, and more importantly, achieve goals in 2026. And that's why Nick's on with us today. Nick, explain a little bit and introduce yourself a little bit more and mention something that maybe I forgot.
No, I think you covered it all, brother. I started in this self-defense, martial arts, bodyguarding industry way back when. But what a lot of people didn't know was I was running a parallel thing in the self-help industry. My brother, older brother, had gone to Jim Rohn's first ever Australian seminar, which was in, I think, 1975-ish. And prior to going to that seminar, he was a bricklayer, what you guys call masons in America. And he would make, you know, like small fences and barbecues and cookouts, all that sort of stuff, just small jobs. And then he went to the seminar, and 4 years later, he's a millionaire, which in 1979 was saying something. And it was all a result of Jim Rohn's thing that he went to. And he bought the cassettes that he would drive around and listen to. He passed away in a traffic accident, and I inherited the cassette tapes, and I used to drive around listening, and that drove a lot of what I did in the martial arts. So at one point, I was the youngest fifth dan in the world. I got a pilot's license in only 3 weeks when I was on leave from the Legion. I co-authored a book in Australia when I was 18, 19 years of age. So I did a lot of stuff based on that Jim Rohn thing, and I followed it, and I keep using it. I've been to Grant Cardone, I've been to Zig Ziglar, I've been to all the guys, right? But one of the things that annoys me is there's a whole pile of pseudo-scientific nonsense in the self-help industry. And one of them is this SMART goal concept, which I hear everybody over here, it's rampant in corporate America. You've got to do SMART goals. And I'm what, I think you remembered Marcus Wynn. Were you friends with him as well?
Yeah. I knew Marcus, yes. Not close, but we communicated some, and you know, I got a signed book by him back on the shelf. So
there you go,
great guy.
Yeah, he told me I was a mismatcher, and he said, you know, people tell you things and you immediately question it. And whenever I hear anything in the self-help, especially stuff that sounds too good to be true, my radar goes off. And I started looking into SMART goals, and there is nothing in SMART goals that's smart. They're dumb. There's no scientific evidence. There's no scientific validation to any aspect of it. And I started ripping it to pieces. And I said, well, you can't just tear it down. You've got to come up with an alternative. So I started doing some research into the science of goal achievement. And that's what prompted the book.
Nice. Let's say good morning to Dixon. Dixon's here. I like a diverse background, and that's probably why I'm friends with you. Former sniper, attorney at law, and a martial arts master. Dixon and I have been friends for years. He's also a martial artist. And so thank you for being here, Dixon.
Nice.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this. I mean, there's one chapter in here that I really like. And I'll talk about that one first. I like the P, and you talk about planning, because I sort of like to make, and this is sort of Larry Wingate, who you're also familiar with,
yes,
likes plans rather than goals or resolutions.
Yes.
Make a plan. And so I really like the P in here when you talk about planning. You want to do a little bit more about that?
Can we table that first and let me rip into why SMART goals are so deplorable? And
yeah, why don't we do that? Because I think I talked about, when I was previewing you earlier, I said something about, this was like on yesterday's show, that you didn't like SMART goals. So yeah, since I already mentioned it, people are expecting that. So let's talk about SMART goals.
I have addressed audiences. I did a big speech last year for the American Public Works Association, and there was about 20% of the audience that had actually never heard of SMART goals, which is surprising because it is so rampant. So SMART goals was created by a guy called George Doran, who was working as a consultant for the Washington Water Company. And there was a massive disconnect between management and the workers. And George had been a former employee that got along with both sides. And so they brought him as a consultant and said, what do we need to do? And so talking to both of them, he came up with, the jobs you want them to do, you're not being specific enough, right? You need to give them clearer outlines of what you want. He said, there has to be some measure for this thing. His A was assignable. Again, the self-help people take things and just run with it and change it and don't give any credit to the guy that came up with it. It was actually assignable. So who is assigned this specific task? Because then they just throw it out to the workers and be surprised when no one got it done. The R was realistic, right? Because they were giving them some assignments that are just impossible, develop this in this time frame. And then the last one was it had to be time bound, right? You had to have a date when you wanted it completed. Somebody somewhere went to a seminar where that was talked about and went, this is brilliant, and then started running with it, saying you could use it for goals. Well, it wasn't designed for goals. It was literally a guideline to assign a task to an employee, nothing more and nothing less. But they ran with this thing. And my problem is they call it goal setting. Well, we can set goals all day long. Everyone does, right? 93% of the world has given up on the goals they set on New Year's resolutions on the 1st of January. And that's because there's nothing in SMART that's actually about, well, you're going to achieve the goal. I mean, we can write them down all day long, but there's got to be something in there that forces you to complete them. So I started looking into a little bit further. Now, the S for specific, that is the one thing they got right. Goals should be specific. Tony Robbins talks about this. He said, if you just have a goal to make more money, and then he would flip a quarter at someone in the audience and go, there, you've accomplished your goal, right? So you need an actual amount. I want to make $1 million in the next 3 years, okay? And that's good. And the same with weight. You can't say, I want to lose a few pounds. You want to go, I want to be 260 pounds by, Christmas, blah, 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 whatever it is. And so specific is great. It's wonderful. But here's the problem. The M in SMART stands for measurable. Well, we just got our measure, right? If we were doing weight loss, we just said 25 pounds. That's the measure. If we were doing the $1 million in 3 years, the measure is the $1 million. So the M now has become completely redundant the way they're setting this up. There's zero need for it. Right now, I'm going to cut to the T on the end because that's related to this, right? Oh, it's got to have a time that you need it done by. Well, we just did that by being specific and saying, I have to make $1 million in 3 years, or I've got to lose the weight by Christmas. We've got a time. So the T on the end of this thing is redundant. So that leaves us with SAR, all right? Now, the self-help industry and the self-help gurus twisted it to be achievable. And then in the same breath, they said, and it has to be realistic. And then I looked at that and went, well, how could it be one and not the other? Right? Is it achievable to lose 25 pounds 12 months from now? Yes, then I would submit it's realistic, and vice versa. If it's realistic, it's achievable. So we only need one of those two. So if we took a goal following their guidelines, All I would need is the S and the A. I want to lose 25 pounds in the next 12 months, right? Is that achievable? Yes, done. All of the rest is redundant. The other problem I have with it is there's nothing in there, and this is what the A came from, is accountability. I started looking at, well, all right, it is true, right? There's only 7% of us are self-guided that will actually set a task and get it done. 93% of people, because of the way their brain is wired, will not. And I started looking at, well, why do people do things that they don't want to do? And it's accountability, right? It doesn't matter what it is. We don't drive to work at 100 miles an hour because someone's going to write you a ticket. You pay your taxes every year, because if you don't, they'll come and lock you up or garnish your wages or whatever else. You turn up to work every day on time because somebody is holding you accountable. You dragged me out of bed this morning, right? I normally get up at the crack of noon. I had to get up at 8 this morning because I am accountable to you and your audience, right, to be here. And that is the single biggest missing ingredient that's not there. So I just started looking into the science of goal setting. So there's guys like Dean Carlin, who's a professor of behavioral economics at Yale. He's done a whole bunch of research on this. There's studies from the University of Indiana. There's all sorts of people. And I started garnering all that information. And I said, well, you got to have an acronym because we're replacing one, and came up with Aspire.
So we have accountability. What's the S then? We'll do the S before we do the P for plan.
Okay. So yeah, the A is the accountability. And there is something I've come up there that is unique. So I was out at a Grant Cardone seminar. This is PC, prior to COVID, right? I think it was 2017 or 18. Big event in Vegas. There was 8,700 people in the audience. And I had written the draft of this book then. I hadn't got it published because one of the things that stopped me publishing in business was people don't see me as a businessman or anything to do with the coaching. All I'm known for is this martial arts bodyguarding. So I'm out there doing this, and I had written the draft of the book, and I'm talking to a guy next to me, and I was making notes for it. And he said, what are you doing? I told him writing this book, explained what it was. And he said, that's brilliant. When I told him the accountability part, he said, I have paid a ton of money for Grant Cardone's business coaches. And he said, they held me accountable, but I did not achieve the goal I set out to achieve. And I said, why not? And I knew what was coming. He said, I had to agree to pay a ton of money if I didn't achieve the goal. But the check I had to write, and back then this was when we were writing checks, the check I had to send to them for them to hold was made to my favorite charity. So he didn't care if he didn't get his goal done because it was going to his favorite charity. And that when I went, okay, I've got to fix that. So again, I just looked at it from a mismatching viewpoint. Why would you not pay someone and get this odious task done instead? Well, it's easy. You'd have to make the money go to a person you didn't like, right? So I tell all the Republicans, you will make this out to the elect Kamala Harris fund, right? Or the Mamdani fund in New York. If you are a diehard Democrat, you make it out to the re-elect Donald Trump fund. If you're a racist and you're white, you make it out to the NAACP. If you're racist and you're black, you make it out to the KKK, right? Whoever or whatever organization you hate more than anything in the world, as your accountability coach, I will have my client give me two amounts of money. And the first one hurts, and the second one really hurts. So let's say I was working with you and your office was a big mess. And I said, okay, so you're going to clean up your office before my next check-in. And then I check in with you 2 days before our appointment. And I go, how's it going? Show me your desk. And you've done nothing, right? That would be the shot across the bows. I would go, oh, you're not taking this seriously. The first check is gone, right? And that one, and you're like, no. And now you will get the task done because you don't want the check that's really going to hurt, all right, to go to these people that you despise. And so that is the accountability. That is the key that locks this whole thing in. Because if you're writing that down, you will get this goal done. And I can also tell when I'm working with clients, and they tell me this is my goal, and I go, okay, assign the money to who. Oh, hang on a minute, no, and then I know immediately they're not really serious, right? They lack the commitment. So that this is the key anchor to the whole thing that I set up. If you're serious about the goal, if it's a goal that has to be done, right, then use this methodology, and it's 100% going to get done. It's not going to be a 7%. It's going to be 100%. It will get done, or your opposition makes some money.
Right, because if you're seriously committed, you shouldn't worry about that money.
Yeah,
because you're going to get it done.
Exactly.
Nice.
And nobody else is using that. Like I said, they have these systems because Carlin came up with, they've got a website called, I think it's Stick, STIKK. Carlin's research showed that there are only 2 reasons someone will get a goal done that they don't really want to get done. And one was money, and the other one was your reputation. Right? If your reputation was on the line, you would do it. And if you had to pay money, if you didn't, if there was some sort of a monetary fine, like I'm going to get fired from work because I show up late all the time, I'm going to get a ticket because I speed, right? You will get the goal done. And that's what brought me to the S. So part of the S is, yes, specific. We already talked about that. That is absolutely key. Your goal should be specific. But this, I use 2 words for the S in the acronym. And the second one is should be shared. I have seen people, again, self-help gurus writing their books, and I read 200 of these things a year to keep up to what's going on. And a lot of them say, don't tell anyone your goals, right? It's not for, it's your goal. Keep it in your head. It's only for you. And I call bullshit, because if I had a goal, I'm going to quit smoking, right? That's my New Year's resolution. And 7 days in, I give up. Well, who knows? Right? You just lie to yourself like you've always, I'll do it again next week. You know, the big, what's the biggest one is I'm going to go on a diet. I'll start next Monday. Instead of, no, you should start right now. No, I'll start next Monday. Again, tells me you're not serious. All right. So by sharing that goal and putting it out in public and telling all of your friends and everyone you know, I'm stopping smoking, I'm stopping drinking, I'm running the marathon, I'm going to lose the weight, I'm going to make the money, I'm opening the business, I'm writing the book, whatever it is, by doing that, you are now held accountable by sharing the goal with all of these other people. And there's a beautiful thing happens. When you share that, the way the world works right now is you're going to get 2 responses. You will get your detractors. And then they go, you're full of it. You say this every year, right? You're going to run. I've heard this a million times. Yeah, you're going to write a book. Ha, 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 ha. Who are you to write a book, right? You get those people. And then you get, usually this is your mom, right? You get your cheer squad, right? Yeah, absolutely, honey. You're amazing. You can do it. I know you can. I have faith in you. Okay. You get those 2 groups. Now, the beauty of this is we all respond to one or the other. I don't respond to cheering squads. When people tell me you can do it, you can do it, you can do it, I'm like, I probably won't end up doing it. I respond to the person that tells me you can't do that, right? I've had doctors tell me I'd never walk again. I had doctors tell me I'd never play sports. I had people tell me I couldn't get in the Legion. I had a captain at the end of basic tell me I could not possibly be a Legion paratrooper because I was too tall for the chutes and too heavy. I love it when someone tells me I can't do something. Right? Because now I will prove you wrong. I will draw that line in the sand. I will die on that hill. I will do what you said I could not do. Right? Or die trying. Now, there are other people that would crush them to hear that. They give up. So you've got to find out who you respond to, report to those people. And if it's the cheering squad, fine. You reach out to them and tell them what you're doing, but you have to share it.
That's great. Now, before we go on to the P, Dixon said, you're great at replacing acronyms, Nick. As when you said PC, I was thinking politically correct, not pre-COVID. LOL.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that the world definitely changed after that. As I have pre and post COVID, there's a lot of stuff changed.
Definitely has.
A lot of it.
So we have accountability, we have sharing and specific, and then we get to my favorite.
Your favorite, planning.
Make a plan, because again, and I think it was Larry Winget. I remember listening to him one time saying he hated goals, he hated resolutions, he liked planning. Make a plan and have a plan and do your plan.
Yep. And and we'll get on. Remind me to talk about the two types of goals, because one is definitely better than the other. The planning is simple. When you get back to the New Year's resolution, right? And the biggest one is losing weight. That's number one. I think quitting smoking, drinking is number two, and then running the marathon type of deal is number three usually. When you go into those, you'll hear someone, I'm going to run a marathon. And then on the first, you'll see them just go out, open your front door if you live in a suburb and look, right? On the 1st of January, you're going to see the guy running down the road. He's bought all the gear. He's got, the shoes and the shorts and the thing, and he's off and huffing and puffing. And then he runs 10 miles and calls his wife crying, come and get me, because his legs aren't working. If we go into the gyms on the 1st of January, right, we all know you can't move. Everyone and their dog is in there. And if you just wait 3 weeks, they're all gone. They don't have plans typically, right? I'm going to run. If you had a plan and you were going to run, you would get that program. Oh, it's brilliant. What is it? Couch to 3K, I think, the Couch to 5K. It's an app. It's online. It's really good. It takes you, if you haven't run since you were in high school, it literally takes you. You go out and you're going to set your clock for 15 minutes. And I think you walk for 2 minutes and you jog for 30 seconds, and you walk for 2 and you jog for 30 seconds. And the next day it's like, I walk a minute, jog a minute, walk a minute. And it takes you through this program over 3 months. At the end of, you are running 3 miles nonstop. That's planning. All right. And when you hear the guy, I'm going to run a marathon, what running club are you joining? What books have you read? They don't. Right. And that always presents a problem. And then the way to plan, one really good way, is just reverse engineering. So if you go, I'm going to run a marathon by October the 1st, then how many miles do you need to be running in September? And how many miles should you be running if we go to July? And then if we come back to March and April, right? And then you break it down into those steps. Now that ties into the goals you talked about. We have process goals and outcome goals. If I have an outcome goal of I'm working in a car dealership and I want to sell 20 cars a month. Now I only sell 18. Well, now I'm beating myself up. I'm useless. I had a goal of 20 and I didn't make it. I'm pathetic, blah, blah, blah. But if you said, I'm going to call 15 clients every day, I'm going to be the first out to meet everyone coming through the door. I'm going to read 3 sales books and I'm going to follow up with every client at least 5 times. Right? That is a process. And if you follow that process and you've sold 18 cars at the end of the month, now you feel good about it. My process goal got me to sell 18 cars. Brilliant. Next month, I'm going to try 20. But if you have just outcome goals, they can be kind of discouraging if you don't hit them. So again, I know you've written books, right? Yes, I have a goal to write a book, but I have to have that process that Marcus taught me. First thing in the morning, you get up, you grab a cup of coffee, you sit in front of your computer, and you don't leave until you've written 3 pages. And then
that is such a great distinction, that process versus outcome. I mean, right there is gold for people to understand.
Yep. Well, we do it in martial arts, right? And this is one of the reasons so many people get black belt and then quit. They have a goal of getting black belt. And the process is turn up every day to train, and they do that, and they go through the ranks, and then they hit the outcome, which is black belt, and they're gone. If they had a process instead of, I want to continue to grow, I want to continue to get better, I want to train into my old age, I want to stay in shape, I always want to be able to defend myself, blah, 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 the process would keep them going, and they'd end up being an 8th Dan or a 9th Dan. So you've got to be careful of outcome goals. This awesome. Is interesting, by the way, and I hadn't put this in the book, but it bears mentioning. So with the coaching I'm doing and the hypnosis and NLP and all the stuff I'm putting together in this hybrid system, I was doing research into NASA. So the first bunch of astronauts that went to the moon, when those guys came back, they did the ticker tape parades all around the country and some other countries in the world. And then they had this horrible history of alcoholism, drug abuse, psychiatric issues, and everything else, because where do you go after you've walked on the moon? Right? There's that, what's that, Brian Regan, the comedian, when he talks about, I went to the moon, right? Well, where did those guys go? They didn't have anything for them to do after that, and they lost their purpose. Now NASA went back to their psychiatrists and they said, how do we ever stop this from happening? So they downplay the fact that they're going to the moon. right? Or going in a rocket, right? They're like, yeah, it's been done before, guys. You're nobody. Don't worry about it. They don't make a big deal about them. You don't hear their names mentioned much. And they tell them, hurry back, because when you get back, we've got to be working on that next project. So they come back and have goals set up that they have to still achieve. And that prevents that mental breakdown. And we could branch off into this whole AI is going to kill a lot of jobs. And some of the founders defending it go, we'll just have universal basic income. Well, brilliant. But why did people 30 years ago retire from work at 65 and were dead by 67? Because they had no life purpose. The second you took that, the guy worked for a company for 50 years. He was the manager of the plant, right? He had to show up every day and work with these workers and turn out the stuff. And all of a sudden here, Mickey Mouse wants a slice of cake and a beer and see you later. And these kids have grown up and moved. They don't need him anymore. He golfs, he fishes a little bit, but his purpose is gone and he's dead, right? You take that purpose away from somebody and they're screwed. So that whole thing with universal basic income, and I don't want to get sidetracked too much, but if we take 100, because they were saying that's the outcome, right? We will be replaced by AI and robots. Well, what are we going to do? Sit around and collect a check for $2,000 every month, week, whatever it is. But what's our purpose? And I talked to a buddy of mine who's a fellow hypnotist in Florida, and he said, well, you don't have to speculate. He said, we work with an Indian tribe down here. They have the highest rate of alcoholism and suicide and depression of any single group in the country. So they're the native Florida Indians that the government gives a check to every month. They don't have to work. They just pick up a check. So they're all on drugs and they're all alcoholics. So that's what's going to happen if we don't have purpose and we don't have goals.
No, and that's, I mean, I've read that and I've seen that, people that don't have a direction and a purpose in life, they just dwindle away. And those that redirect and find a new purpose and so forth, they just continue to go.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I got a Christmas card yesterday from Clarence Bass. If you remember him way back.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got 3 of his books. I was looking at them the other day.
Yeah, I mean, I have all his books on the shelf back here too. And I met him years ago when I was down in Albuquerque, and we keep in touch. And I said I got a Christmas card from him yesterday, and he's pushing 90, and he's still writing, he's still exercising, he's using himself as the example of, and he has that purpose, and he's still going strong.
He's an amazing
man to do.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. Yeah, I remember opening those bodybuilding magazines when I was into that stuff years ago, and you'd see the pictures of him then in his 60s. Sure, he looked like a T-bone steak wrapped in plastic wrap. He was
he got his body fat down to like 2% or under 2%, for photo shoots and stuff. It's like incredible. Yep.
Amazing.
Really nice guy. Him and his wife, just, really good people too.
Yep.
We're going to say hello. Thank you for being here, Marjorie.
Marjorie, yep.
And so we did the ASP. Let's go ahead and go. What's I?
I is write the goddamn stuff down, right? So Indiana University did a study on kids, and I love the fact that we have MRI machines now, because all this stuff that we used to speculate, like people didn't believe hypnosis was real, and Dr. Siegel out in Stanford has now proven that it is using MRIs. So Indiana University hooked these kids up, and they were writing and they were texting and they were just trying to remember. And when they write, it engages far more of the brain than anything else did. And one of the reasons for that is this is why I wonder about school systems that talking about doing away with teaching people cursive and how to write, right? We're not going to need it. We'll just text. When I write, and if you've done any sort of penmanship, as I'm writing the letter A and I'm about to join it to the next letter, it's going to now alter where I send the tail of the A to. If it's going up to an H, or if it's going to an I, or if it's going to a P or a Q, right? It's going to shift, and my brain has to be tracking that as I'm writing, which is why more of it's engaged. When I'm texting, I'm just tapping on, right, a key. I'm not having to think about where does it go next. So half of the brain's engaged. Then they did studies, and this is, again, I wonder how much money they waste on studies like this. It would seem obvious. A professor sat there with 1/3 of his students. He talked to them and asked them questions and did this whole thing. And then he got another third who wrote this stuff down. And then he had a group that texted. And at the end of it, he asked the guys who he just talked with to recall. And of course, they recalled about 13% of what they talked about. The guys that had texted, if questioned, could recall a certain amount. It was certainly more than the guys who had done just talking about it. But the people who wrote had the greatest recall of all, right? And then, of course, you have the notes that then you can access them. So that's even bigger. This whole idea of just trying, it's a simple experiment. The next time you go to the grocery store, right, look at all the stuff you need in the house and try and remember it, right? And see how much you come back without, and then write it down and go over, and you'll come back with everything, right? It has to be written down. It's got to be. And they proved again the benefits of journaling, just that writing, stream of consciousness writing, all of this engages your brain. There's another psychiatrist, I can't remember his name, I mention him in the book. It's brilliant for brain health, right? The actual act of writing every single day, journaling, putting something down, writing something. So yeah, awesome. Inscribe, right.
And then we have the R.
Yeah, rewarded. So again, people respond best. Like Chase Hughes talks about this, right? How when we're trying to get someone to do something, we need to appeal to the mammalian part of their brain, not their logical part. This is why people don't get diets. Now, logically, I know I need to lose weight, right? But you've got to you got to get your person to do something the same way you get your dog to do something. You can't reason with the dog. You have to come up with some way that appeals to that mammalian part of his brain. And Chase, go listen to some of his stuff. It's brilliant. About why that mammalian part of the brain is so important. And one of the things we know with that is reward works, right? When you take your dog outside before he pees on the carpet, right? And then you reward him outside for doing that. It doesn't take him very long before they pick up on, I'm supposed to go out here and do this. So all I go into there is the reward. And the beautiful thing about the rewards is they do not have to be big. Right? I don't have to give myself a Rolex watch or buy a Porsche. It can literally be, I'm gonna take an hour this Friday and watch a movie, right? Or I'm gonna treat myself to something. The only caveat I have is don't make the reward counterproductive to the goal. So if your goal is, I'm gonna lose weight, and at the end of the month you weigh yourself, I'm down 3 pounds, I'm gonna go and eat 2 pizzas and a slab of chocolate cake. Right? That's probably not the best reward to have. Go and buy yourself a skinnier or a smaller size t-shirt, right? Or a smaller size pair of jeans or a new belt or whatever, something that works in conjunction with. And then the other thing, and this is missing in SMART, this is a problem I have. Let's go back to SMART and use it for weight loss. I'm going to lose 25 pounds by December 2026. Right? So according to SMART, I've covered all my bases. It's specific, it's got a measure, it's got a time, achievable, and it's realistic. So why is that going to happen? I've done nothing in there like what diet am I going to use? What foods am I going to eat? What's my meal plan? What gym? How am I going to exercise? Am I going to walk, run, take 10,000 steps, join a gym, do yoga, Pilates, get a Peloton bike? What? How am I going to deal with the mindset, the discipline? Right, to eschew the chocolate cake and the foods and all the stuff that I normally binge on? How am I going to do away with that? None of that's in SMART. So I added that component of you have to have resources. And a key part of that is you have to be resourceful. Tony Robbins talks about this. He said a lot of people say, oh, I couldn't do this because I didn't have the resources. He said you could if you were resourceful, right? Figure it out.
Awesome. And then we got E.
Yeah, E is twofold. It's emotional and it is exclusive. One of the guys I met in the Legion in basic, he was one of the oldest recruits we had. Legion takes you up to 40 with exceptions, and he was 40. And he and I hit it off. We were playing chess in the barracks all the time. He was a really good player. And he's a former dentist from Belgium. And I go, why is a dentist in the French Foreign Legion? Like, I don't understand that at all. A lot of the guys in there, lost causes, basically come out of prison, and where am I going to go? I can't get a job. I'll join the Legion. And here's this guy, he's a dentist. And we got talking, and he burst out crying again. He'd had a nervous breakdown. He became a dentist because his father was a dentist, his grandfather was a dentist, and his great-grandfather was a dentist. So he was expected and pressured by that family. He had to become a dentist. He didn't want to be a dentist. And dentists, by the way, one of the highest rates of suicide of any profession in the country. And he had a nervous breakdown, and he couldn't face his father and grandfather. He fled and joined the Legion. He just disappeared, left his wife behind, ran and hid in the Legion. And I remembered that when I was writing the book. The goal should be your goal. So I'm a hypnotist, and I get people all the time coming in to stop smoking. And I have them walk in. The first question I ask them, do you want to stop smoking? Nah, it's my wife. She wants me to stop because the in-laws are coming. She doesn't like the smell in the house and blah, blah, blah. But you don't want to stop. No, I love it. Right? My doctor wants me to stop. And I stop them right there and go, I can't help you. And they're like, what do you mean? And I said, hypnosis doesn't work that way. Despite the stage show stuff, I don't control anybody. I can help you stop when you want to by working on your unconscious, right? But I can't make you do anything. If you don't want to stop and I try and tell you you have to, it's not going to work. Save your money. And until that day, and I got a friend of mine, he's ex-Green Beret, he now works in an ICU unit as a nurse. And he said, we have them with emphysema. They got literally running around with oxygen tanks, coughing up their lungs, and they sneak out of the ward to go and smoke a cigarette in the parking lot, right? I'm not going to make that person stop. You have to want to. So yeah, it's got to be your goal. And goals get done when there is an emotional component, right? So you look at people that stop drinking. What do they got to do? Hit rock bottom. You will hear the person, there'll be some comment made because they're overweight and they hear it, and that's the one that cuts them to the bone. I know a guy who did stop smoking when his granddaughter didn't want to visit him anymore. His wife had tried to get him to stop. Everyone had tried to get him to stop. His granddaughter wasn't coming over, and he called like, I don't see her anymore. She doesn't like going to your house. You smell. And that was enough for him. That was now emotional, and that was his goal that he wanted, and he stopped smoking like that. Done. Immediate. So yeah, those two components I think are key, which is why they got included.
No, those are great. Sadly, one thing that you just reminded me of, back when I was with the 82nd Airborne Division, I had my wisdom teeth taken out.
Ouch.
And the dentist that took my wisdom teeth out committed suicide.
Yep.
They found him on Yatkin Road in his car with a firearm. He killed himself because when I read that, I was like, that's the guy that took my wisdom tooth out a little while ago. Like,
dentists and psychiatrists, the two highest rates of suicide in specific industries. And I'm not sure, psychiatry I can understand. Sitting in a room every day, listening to depressed people come in and dump their crap on you, right? If you just hear that all the time, I can see, garbage in, garbage out, right? That's all you're listening to all day long, 5 days a week. Yeah, I'd probably kill myself after an hour of that. But the dentistry, I've never understood why. I've heard all these different theories, but I've never understood why they do it. And something unrelated to that, but we should mention back on the importance of writing goals, because I know you're a fan of Jim Rohn, as am I. You will no doubt, excuse me, you'll no doubt remember his story when he met Earl Shove.
Yes. And
Shove said to him, well, Mr. Rohn, show me your list of goals. Let's have a look at them. And he goes, what? And he goes, your goals, like, let me see them. And he goes, I don't have them. And he goes, oh, are they in the car? And he's like, no, I don't. And he said, you don't have any goals written down? And he went, no. And he said, then I can tell you how much money you have in the bank. Right. And he told him, and it was accurate. And he said, you have to have them. And that's when Rohn started writing his goal. And immediately he did that. Boom. And that's when my brother came back and did the same thing, took that goal setting workshop, and away it went. And we've learned a lot about that since, right? It's not just writing them. There's all sorts of visualization and stuff that works with it. But yeah, it's absolutely key. You have to have them. What's the line from the Bible that I use in the book? Without vision, the people perish, right?
Right.
Yep.
Where can people go to learn more about you, get the book? I mean, I know it's available on Amazon, but where do you want people to go?
Nick Hughes Coaching is the new site I just launched. That's getting, and it's on there right now. There's a page where you can link and get it off of Amazon, but that page will be expanding into its own website. So eventually the link will take you to it. I'm building a Nick Hughes author website because I've got about 6 more books currently in the pipeline. As I'm weaning my way out of martial arts, I'm getting to, I've got 5 ruptured discs, AFib, no cartilage in the shoulder. I'm looking at the writing on the wall. I'm just not going to be able to keep physically teaching. So I'm now getting these books onto paper while I've still got my mental faculties. And so I've got the Bug in Bag book coming from the How to Be Your Own Bodyguard book. I have Mindset for Martial Arts, which is all about one I've been doing for my students for years. It's the key element. I broke down what you need to win fights. Years and years and years ago, I would see black belts turn up to work on the nightclub door. I worked in the most violent club in the city. And we'd have these black belts show up and they'd get their asses kicked by nobodies. And I'm like, I don't understand. They have this beautiful technique. Why are they getting beaten? And I started to what is the bare minimum we need? It's not just techniques, right? You have to have tactics. And then I realized even more important is mindset. And that became the key driver again. So I started, if I'm going to teach people how to defend themselves and how to fight, I'd better teach them mindset. And I started looking into neuroplasticity, self-talk that we use on ourselves. Angela Duckworth, who wrote that book, I think Grit, talks about the same thing, right? The guy on paper looks really like an ideal candidate to get into West Point or the SEALs, and they don't, right? It's the guy that's got it in here, and that's the basis of SAS and all those guys, right? It's what's going on in here that matters. So I've got a book coming out on that. So eventually I'll have a Nick Hughes author site where they'll all be available. But right now, if they go to Nick Hughes Coaching, they'll find the link in there for it. It's on Amazon, and this weekend, I hope, I have a goal to get in here. If I can wrap up those websites in time, is to get in here to this studio while no one's next door and do the audio version of it.
That'll be great. So have that. What would you say, somebody buys this book. Okay, I've read the book. What are you going to tell them? What do you have to do more than just read the book?
Oh, well, that's the thing. There's a set of forms in the back to write your goals out. So I have an appendix in the back, and it takes you through all the different next steps, right? So how do we find an accountability partner? And that's key, because the worst thing you can do, right, is get your friend to be your accountability partner, because you know what's going to happen, right? The goal's not done, and you're going, oh, come on, man, I really wanted to, but this happened and this happened and this happened. And now the friend's sitting there going, if I spend that money on it, he's going to hate me. It's going to damage the friendship. Okay, I'll let you slide, right? And you're done. This is why having an accountability coach is so important, or somebody that you absolutely 100% trust to do this. I even have a contract that you can download, that you can sign it with the person, saying you are giving me permission that if you do not do this goal by this particular date, the money will be gone and you will not hate me for it. I am doing this in a bid to help you. That is written out. You'll be able to download those off the website. And it literally takes you through process versus outcome goals, what you should write. There's a goal workshop in there. So what sort of goals are we going to set? We have personal goals. We have career goals, material goals, health goals. All of that stuff is in there. And I give you some prompts to sort of like jog your, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about having one of those. So yeah, it's all in the back of the book. And then eventually that's going to be an online course you'll be able to download.
That is excellent. Jay and Vicky said good morning. Appreciate you guys being here and saying hello. So I want to tell everybody, if you got plans, goals for 2026, this book will help you achieve them. Get the book, work on them. Then when the course and other materials they'll just help you a little bit more. And I have one final question for you today, Nick.
Yes.
How are the tango lessons going? And I asked Nick that because he has a list of goals accomplished and goals that he still wants to accomplish, and one of them is learn to tango.
And I said that's funny you said that, because they said the hardest thing they've ever done was teaching Arnold Schwarzenegger to do the tango for the movie True Lies. Remember the scene at the end?
I remember that, where they were dancing there at the beginning.
That was the hardest thing they've ever done, was having to teach Arnold to look accomplished as a tango dancer. That took more prep for the movie than anything else in the movie. I thought that was funny. I had a girlfriend at the time, and she wanted to do it, and I went, "Why not?" And she and I broke up. So I still think it's a good idea, and I'll get to it, but I prioritize those things. I said that I was going to have accomplished some of those goals that I'd written when I wrote the book, and I have. Right. So there's a list up the back. So yes, those ones that were done. There's a really good book, by the way, by a guy called Nick Hughes, 5-Day Weekend, one of the best business books I've ever read. And he was a kid, 17 years of age. And there's another guy I mentioned that had 187 goals they wrote out that they wanted to do. And that guy's accomplished all but one, and that's go to the moon. He's had breakfast on the deck of the Titanic. They got a bath escape, went down, landed it on the deck, and they had breakfast down there. And this is the sort of thing he set and accomplished. One final point. If you look on the bottom of the cover of the book.
Written by human and not AI.
What it's supposed to say. Yeah, because here's a problem, right? That is the first book in the history of bookdom that has that written on the bottom. I suspect there's going to be a lot more, because now when you put a book into Amazon, it even asks you, did you use any AI writing this? Because what's happening now is I see these courses on Facebook. Oh, write a book in 48 hours. You're not writing a book. You're plagiarizing other material, right, using AI. And then they slap a cover on and load it up on Amazon, and Amazon's being inundated with this junk. I had a hypnosis client that came to see me, and I said, "What were you doing?" And he said, "I just got done reading a book for my daughter." And I said, "Any good?" And he said, "It was horrible. We got it off Amazon. We then went back and found out she's written 27 books in 3 months, right? Totally impossible. All she's doing is using AI, plagiarizing nursery rhymes and slapping a cover and putting it up." And he got duped into buying one. And I said, "I am going to make sure that people know, because now you're going to pick up a book. I wonder how much of this crap's written by this bullshit, right?" And so I put on the bottom. It's going to go on the bottom of every one of my books, and I suspect a lot of other authors are going to end up following the same route.
No, I agree.
So you had in your hands the first book ever written with that on the bottom of the cover.
Written by human, not AI, and that's excellent. I saw that when I first opened it, yesterday. And it's like, yep, I like that, because I'm so sick and tired of some of what I hate is all the stuff on social media that's just complete bullshit, and then people believe it's true.
Yeah, it's one of my biggest bugbears right now with fighting. I look at these kids on TikTok and Facebook, and they're demonstrating martial arts, and they get 1 million views, and people like you and I will put something up and we get 5 people look at it. And I went, why is this happening? Like, why don't they look at that and know that couldn't possibly work? And then you find out this generation of kids, I'm meeting some, and this blows me away. They've never been in a fight in their life. They went through school without getting in a physical fight. So their knowledge of violence comes from John Wick and Jason Bourne. So when they see that Indian kid, and I hate this stuff where they do the technique badly and then they go, and then they do it how it's supposed to work. And they're doing a backflip or something that's not going to work. They're chopping the gun and sending it flying, that one, right? And those kids lap it up and they think that's going to work for me. And I'm like, you're getting people killed. You know, our mate Rich Dimitri and Chris Roberts. Chris had one the other day. They had a guy in a dojo in India pulling a knife on a girl with a cell phone, and she hands over the phone, and he goes, and then he shows slap the knife out the way and shove the phone in the guy's throat. You know, the move out of the Jason Bourne movie, where he puts the book in and hits the end of the book. The guy clearly saw that, so he puts the phone and has her hit it, and she's going to die. She's going to get stabbed to death fighting for a phone with this crap. And 1 million people have looked at that video and gone, "It's great." So yeah, I have a big problem with it. And the whole AI thing, LinkedIn is having major problems because now, you know, they tell everyone put content. So people are just going to an AI app, write a thing for me every day and put it on LinkedIn. They're not even reading it. And now LinkedIn is going to, I predict LinkedIn is going to end up video heavy because you're going to have to go on there and say, hey, it's me and this is what I think, rather than just putting out printed content.
Right. Well, with that note, I do want to tell people, though, go get this book. Written by a real human. You've been listening to him for the last hour, and some great stuff, and even more great stuff in the book. And that will help you achieve what you want to achieve in 2026 and beyond. Thank you, Nick, for being on here and talking about this. I think it's an important topic. I think it's sometimes more important when we talk about some of this kind of stuff than the violence. I mean, it's more applicable because, I mean, not everybody's going to face violence. Right. Everybody can accomplish more if they put their mind to it and aspire to it. And this is a resource to help them. And before we go, Dixon said, if Arnold can do it, you can do it, Nick. So he's pulling for you. And Jay said,
now I'll have to go and get the lessons, and we'll come back. Our next podcast will going.
And Jay said he's putting it on his purchase list. Thanks, Jay. Excellent. Well, thank you much, Nick.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas and a wonderful holiday season. And I'm sure we're going to have you back on sometime next year as well. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Same to you, brother. Appreciate it.
Take care, everybody. And I will be back to see you tomorrow.